So I hope that wasn't too difficult to follow. I know that was a bit complex and it was kind of tricky because there were a lot of little things that we needed to tweak in that section. Luckily, we're going to be doing something fun and a lot easier. We're going to be handling audio during the animation and also when Link enters a screen. So this is something that's cool we can do. So to begin with this, let's go into our assets folder. And I just want to show you that we have a variety of audio sounds, okay? And the sound that I want to play when Link picks up an item, specifically the sword, is the important item MP3. And when Link is on the overworld, we're going to be playing the overworld MP3. So let's begin by just playing the important item MP3 when Link picks up the weapon. Let's go into animations. And we'll scroll down. So in order to play the animation, all we need to do is we need to create a new audio object with the path to the audio. So it's a relative path, so we need to go up one folder and let's go to assets, audio, important item MP3. And we can call the play method right on the new object. Let's test this out. I heard it play. I'm sure you can too. So now that that's working, we want to actually have an audio for each screen. So let's go back to our text editor and let's load up the other screen. Load screen. So let's change this from shop to the original screen that we had, which was opening screen. How I want to make this work going forward is I want to have each screen have its own audio path that gets played when the screen is loaded. So audio path, assets, audio, overworld, MP3. And upon load of screen, we want this audio path to play. The way JavaScript handles this is we use an audio object, as we've seen. So I'm going to have this game have an audio object property. Audio object. We could set it to undefined first. And on load screen, we'll create this object. Because when we go from screen to screen, if you remember how the game works, when you go from one screen to another and the screens have the same audio file, the sound doesn't restart, it continues to play. So what we want to do is we want to instantiate a new audio object if the audio object is either 1, undefined, meaning the game has just been booted up for the first time, or the audio file is being played for the first time, or 2, we want to handle the situation where the audio paths are the same from the previous screen to the current screen, and therefore we will not change the audio object. We will not create any kind of new object. We'll just continue to play the same sound. Let's handle this at the bottom of the function. So if this audio object is equal to undefined, and we'll handle the first case, then set this audio object equal to new audio. And new audio will take the audio path. So audio path, screen object. We can just pass it right in. And then we can do audio object play. And if you can hear, my game is now playing the music of the overworld, which is what we had planned to work. Let's mute this for the moment now, because it could get very annoying while we're trying to program. The other situation is if the audio path from the previous object and the audio path of the current object do not match, then we want to play the audio of the new path, because obviously we're moving from one screen to the other, so we need to change the music. Like if we're entering a dungeon perhaps from the overworld, we'll then play that dungeon music. So else if this audio object is defined, okay, so it exists, and this, or rather audio path, is equal to the previous audio path. So you know what? We also need to add a property of audio path that we can use to compare for later. We could set this as an empty string. And we'll set this string in here is equal to audio path. So if they do not match, then this audio object, and we'll just set it again to a new audio, set it to audio path. This audio path is equal to audio path, and we're playing it again. Play. You know what, actually, since this looks like it's pretty much the same result, why don't we just move this up into this if statement, and we can make it an OR. That way we don't need two logic structures, we can just have one. Cool. And then for audio path here, we can just do silence. I actually have an MP3 for silence just for this occasion. So cool, now we need to test this out. We need to see that a transition from one screen to the other will play the proper music. And luckily we already have a transition space set up. So why don't we go back. Let me unmute my game. So you can see the sound is not playing, but that's also because I'm getting this error in the top right corner. It says uncaught and promised DOM exception play failed because the user failed to interact with the document first. This error is a very common error and actually has nothing to do really with our code. It is a security feature that a lot of browsers like Brave, Google Chrome, Firefox implement to prevent malicious behavior on the part of the website. One of the things that it does is it blocks sound. So in order to allow our browser to play the sound without interacting with the document first, it's different for each browser. I do suggest you Google it if you're having trouble. I do know for Brave, if you guys are using that browser, you can go to the site information, and if you go into site settings, you go into privacy and security here, and if I scroll down, I can find the sound option, and for me, I'll set it to allow. Each browser is probably going to have a slightly different setup. You may have to navigate to this option in a different way, but pretty much every browser that blocks the sound from being played on default will have an option that you can use to just allow it to play automatically. So okay, I'm going to reload. I'm going to unmute it. So here's my sound. Let's see now if I run down to the stairs, it'll be silent. It was not silent. Let's go back to our code. So you know what? We actually do need this in a separate if statement, because this audio object, if it's undefined, it can't be paused. That would probably make sense. And very similarly, we can just copy this. That looks a little bit better. Let me play the sound again. Very good. Okay, now when Link enters, the sound goes to silence. Nice. So good, now that we got that done, I just want to make a quick change to the shop's silence string. And I want to plug this one in because what I want to see is I want to make sure that this MP3 isn't played twice. So let's just see how that works. Let's check it out. Turn on the sound yet again. The song should continue. And it does. Cool. And the last thing we'll do with this is we will make sure that the song will loop over and over again. So let's go into the audio object. And we can do this audio object loop. And we'll just set it to true. And let me mute this game again. Cool. Now it's actually starting to feel like a video game a little bit. And we're going to be doing fun things going forward. The next thing that we're going to be handling now is the inventory. I know before we were working with the inventory when we were trying to render the sword while Link was swinging it, but now we're actually going to set up the inventory so that way we can add items to it, but we can also display some of the values on the screen. That's important. We want to know how many bombs we have, how many rupees and keys we have, things of that nature. So let's begin. We're going to create another canvas, actually, in our html.js file. And this canvas screen will be similar to our game screen. So I think I'm going to copy that. Oop. I'm going to have the same aspect ratio. I'm going to change the ID to inventory. And I'm going to change the top value to about -550. I knew these values beforehand, so it's easy for me to quickly plug it in. We're going to add a left value as well. A left of 77 pixels. And this won't let us have anything on the screen immediately. Right now, we're just setting the groundwork to show the bottom half of the inventory screen. In order for us to actually have something render onto our screen, we're actually going to create a class called the inventory screen class. So if we go into classes, create a file called inventory screen.js, and we're going to define a class called inventory screen. Give it a default constructor. And this inventory screen is going to work kind of similarly to our game. It's going to have a canvas and a context property where we will be using these properties to render things onto the inventory screen. And it will also have a render function. In order to create this context, we'll do this. We'll start with the canvas. We'll do this canvas. And we will get the second canvas here, right? And we'll get it by using the inventory screen ID. So we'll do document get element by ID, inventory screen, and we'll get the context by using the get context method, and we'll set it to 2D. Let's create the render function. We can call this render from here. And I think in the HTML file, I will define its height and width just because we're already doing that styling in here. We could just keep it in here as well. So I'll set the height to about 700 pixels to begin with. And then let's set the width. This is just a guess. We'll set it to 1100. Similar to the aspect ratio, we can increase, you know what, we'll just start with the aspect ratio, why not? I think that looks good to begin. So now that we have the height and the width defined in the canvas HTML element, let's begin by rendering a black screen. If you remember what we're doing in the game, we're actually taking this, see the context, we're doing fill rect, or no, sorry, we're doing clear rect and clearing the screen of everything that's on it from the previous frame. So we want to do that to clear the bounds of the frame. Then let's set the fill style. And we can set it to any color, but let's just set it to black because that's what's in the game. And then let's call the fill rect function and pass in the parameters that we need to. So it's width and then the height. So now once we initialize this object, we should see a square rectangle blocking out a portion of our screen. In order to initialize it, we need to first export this class. And we can just set it to the default. I don't think we'll be declaring any other classes in here. And we can say this screen, this inventory screen. And we can define it off the bat. Why not? Inventory screen. So let's see what we got. Let's see if the spacing is correct. Okay. It seems that the spacing is, there's a problem. As you can see, it's covering a portion of our screen. Now, I think what we should do is just move down the game screen a bit. I did know that I wanted it to be about 500 something pixels away from the top, just to give it a little bit of space so we could read what it is that we're actually writing onto the inventory screen. So why don't we instead move the top down by, how about 100 or 200? Let's see how that looks. Okay, that's a little bit too far. I had a feeling it would be about 150 or 140. I think 140 might be good. I think 140 is good because it's about 2 blocks more or less. This looks to be about 2.5 blocks long. I think that's okay. We can keep it like this. Actually, you know what? I do like it. I think maybe we could go a little bit further down. We can move both the game screen and the black screen down. But this is not bad. We could keep it like this. I think I'm actually happy with that. Ooh. And so we have the screen showing up. And now we want to render some of the information on that part of the screen. We'll go ahead later and make it pause and it will drop down. We will take care of those animations. But first, let's just handle the bottom half of that screen. If we go into inventory screen, we're going to create a few images that will hold, well, create a few image objects that will hold the images of the things like the heart, the container of the A button, the B button container, those kinds of things. And these will also be properties. So the first thing I want to do is create the A button image. This A button is equal to new image. And we will want to set the src value of this image so it can load up properly. So this A button, src, and we can set it to assets, inventory, A PNG. And you know what? I think I want to create an initialize method that will hold some of this. And this we'll call render instead. Just so we can separate the properties from any alterations we do to the properties. So that's our first image. And now let us draw the image and see how that looks. So let's go to C. This C, draw image. If you remember, we're going to pass several values. The first thing that we're going to pass is the image. So this A button, and then we're going to either pass just the destination where we want it to go or the source of the sprite that we want on a sprite sheet and then the destination. So let's look at the A.png. And I think we can just take the whole sprite. That doesn't look too bad to me. So why don't we try out a few values? Let's try 150, 125, and then the height and the width. Let's just do 40, 40. Let's see how that looks. Oh, what's not rendering? So now that we're drawing this on the initial render, it looks good here, but we're only calling the render once on initialization. We need to continuously call the render, which is why we have access to the inventory screen in the game object. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the inventory screen in the game object, and on every render the game does, it will also render the inventory screen. We can do this by just rendering the inventory screen like that. Let's see what we have now. We have the button, but it looks like it's a little off-centered. We may need to raise it up a little bit. Let's go back to the game. Right now it's at 125. I also think it's a little big. Let's make this 30. And let me see what it looks like now. That's better. Okay. Could we do 25? And would it fit then? That's not bad. I actually kind of prefer how it looks here. And I want to move it over a little bit. Let's see, by 20. Let's look at the original game. Oh no, it's much more in the middle. So let's play around with this. Let's actually make it 135. Now it's up too high. Move it back down. 122. I think that's a good middle ground. Okay. It's more or less where we want it to be. We can adjust it as we go. I think I'll move this up just a little bit and move it to the right again. Okay, that's okay for right now. Now let's do the B button. And we saw that the B button, I believe, was right to the right of the A button, or right to the left, excuse me, of the A button. So let's render B now. We can go on. We go into assets, inventory, b.png. If we look at b.png, it's a little bit of a larger image. By the way, I'm sorry, guys. I tried to get images that were as similar to one another in height, width, things like that. We can render this similarly to how we're doing A. We can just do draw image. We can even do it right below. So render A button, render B button. Just change this to B. And we'll move it over to the left. Let's see how that looks. Oh no, it needs to be much further over. Actually, it should be about 30 pixels over. Okay, they're not the same size. We could fix that. Let's make B slightly taller. And we'll move this over by 10 to start. Okay. Because the images are shaped slightly differently, they're not lining up perfectly. Let's just move this up by 5. Move it down by 2. I'll take off 2 from the height as well. Or you know what, maybe no, I want to move it down. It needs to go in the opposite direction. Oh, that was X. Skip ahead a minute or so. I just want to get this on point. Okay. 18.5. Let's see how that looks. Okay, good enough. We'll take it. What's the next thing we may want to render? How about this life text? We could render that now. So let's create an image for that. This life text, new image. We'll set the src here. This life text, src. Life.png. Render life text. Draw image. Before I actually render this, let's see where it is in the original game. Okay, it's up in the corner. So perhaps the corner for us might be 220, 110. Then we might want it to be 50. And we'll just do 50 by 50 to start. I know it probably won't end up being like that, but let's see how it looks. Okay, so that's where it lands. We need to move it up. So let's subtract a value from the y. Let's move it up by 10. Let's not make it as tall. And maybe we'll make it wider. It's still pretty tall, and it probably could be a little bit wider. So let's make it a little wider. Not as tall. Let's half the height, and we'll move it back up by 10 because I know changing the height will affect it. Man, that looks pretty good. Let me see. Yeah, it's not perfect, but that's good enough. I like it. So we can stick with that. The next thing that we want to render is the gold icon or the key and bomb icon. We'll just do gold icon to start. We'll get to that one after. So this gold icon, follow the pattern. This gold icon, src. And you know what? We're rewriting this assets inventory string quite often. So you know what we can do? Why don't we just cut this? I can do const asset or asset path. Just paste that in here. And then we can do this. Asset path. We can just replace this string with asset path. I think that looks good. That way we don't make a mistake in the future. And now we can draw this image. So render gold icon. Just draw image. And we'll render this gold icon. And we can start it off at 115. And I think this should look good. 85 for the Y, because I do know it's above the A and the B images. And it's small, so why don't we just do 15 and 15 to see how that looks. Let's see. I think maybe this should be 85 and this should be 115 because it didn't appear on the screen. And that's okay too. I think I'm okay with that position. Then the next, render gold icon. And the next thing we'll do is render bomb and keys icon, which is this one, key and bomb. So follow the pattern, key and bomb equals new image Right icon. Then this key and bomb icon, src. You can essentially just copy that and just change the name. Key and bomb icon. Then this C draw image, this key and bomb icon. And it will be at about the same X as the gold icon, but a little bit further down. So why don't we do it at 125? We'll make it the same width, but slightly longer since there's two icons in it. Actually, I like that. I like that pretty, I like that a lot. It looks pretty good. So we can keep it there. Now we're going to handle a fun part of this feature. We're going to make the inventory screen slide down, because in the Legend of Zelda video game, when the player pauses, the inventory screen slowly slides down to cover the whole screen. And then when the player unpauses, the screen slowly slides back up. And the way we're going to handle this is by first listening to the user input. We're going to set a key as the pause key in our switch statement. And we are going to write in case P. We'll just make it P for pause. And we'll set this is paused to the inverse of itself. And let's not forget to create this. This is paused, and we'll set it to false to begin. So in render, we will pass this is paused value to the inventory screen. Inventory screen. There it is. This is paused. And we'll go into the render method of the inventory screen and write is paused. So in here, we are going to manipulate the style of the inventory screen based on whether or not the value is true or it is false. So to begin, if is paused, we're going to move the screen down. And we can do this by first getting the value of the screen's top position, which we had defined in index.html. It is right here. We can get it. So let top string equal to, and this will be string, by the way. Don't get that confused. We're actually getting a string. We're going to get this value. And not only do we want to get this value, but it's going to come back like this, negative 558 px pixels. What we're going to do is we're going to increment the value of top until it reaches the desired place on the screen. But to do this, we actually need to have it as a number. We can't increment a string. So what we want to do is we want to take top, we want to slice the string, and we will start from the beginning. And since we know that px will always be the last two characters of the string, we can always just slice off the last two letters of the string. So let's do this canvas style top dot length, and we'll subtract 2. So from the very back, we'll be subtracting. And this is going to turn into that. And then we're going to coerce this string into a number. And actually, I'm going to just set this to top. I don't need to have it as a string because it's going to change types. JavaScript is nice like that. It allows us to change the type of a variable even after it's initialized. So we can do this top is times 1. And the reason why, I'm not redeclaring it. And what JavaScript does is when you times a string by 1, if it's possible, JavaScript will coerce the string to be an integer actually, because it's smart. So we can take advantage of this mechanism very easily to do this. And we're going to have to decide how far down do we want the inventory screen to slide. Right now it's at negative 558 pixels. It's about 700 and I think 70 pixels tall, if I remember correctly. So I think it's reasonable to move it about 770 pixels down. If we handle it like that, we can say while the top is less than 220 pixels, because what I'm thinking about is 558. I'm thinking about this in absolute terms, where 558 plus 220 is equal to 778. That's pretty good. So I'm thinking about this in absolute terms. We will change the value of the top variable by 1. So we'll do top increment by 1. And then we'll set this canvas style top property to top plus px, because again, when we use an addition operator between an integer and a number, JavaScript will actually take this and convert it to a string type. And let's see, I'm going to console.log out top. Let's see how we do. I'll press P. Okay, it's coming down, but it's very, very slow. We want it to be a little bit quicker. Let's see how far down it goes. It's showing the top a little bit. I don't want that. So why don't we increment it by 10? And instead of moving it down to, or moving it up rather, to 220, why don't we just make that 200? See again how this works. Okay. We see the bottom a little bit. I'm okay with seeing the bottom, but let's play around with it, see how that works. I think that looks pretty good. And it doesn't slide back up yet, but that's okay. We haven't programmed in that functionality. Doesn't look bad. We can use that. If the sword is equipped, we want to render that sword in that A box that we're already rendering. So we want to get the sword's sprite and then render it within the dimensions of the box. So what we're going to do now is we need to get the isActiveA property, or the ActiveA property. So what we need to do now is we need to get the ActiveA property from player. And we can do this by passing player to render. So we can drop it right here in the arguments. And we can go here and add it from index.js. And what we're going to do is, if we're going to render sword if active A is equal to sword1. We'll go and say if player components inventory active A and dot name, because if you remember, active A, the sword1 is actually an object that will contain a property that says sword1. And you can see this. And you can see this right here. So we want to check against this value. Is equal to sword1 render. And we can just take this object from the up key because we want to render the sword in its up position. So I can do const up player components. And you know what? Let's just take out, or actually, no, we can keep it like that. inventory active A src rect. And we'll be rendering the sword from the link.png. So now we actually need to load in this very large sprite sheet. So this link sprite sheet, I'm going to title it that. And this link sprite sheet, it's not going to be using the asset path because that goes into inventory. We'll just go into assets and then link.png for that. And we have to set the src. And then we can render it. So this C draw image, this link sprite sheet, render sword 1. We can just do up. And you know what? We can instead just do this. We'll just destructure up instead. Y width height. Before we go ahead and check, there will be a few other logic statements we'll need to add in here. We need to make sure of a few things. The first thing we need to make sure of is that the player is defined, because at the very beginning of the game, the player will be undefined. And we need to make sure that active A is defined as well. If we don't, when it gets to this third condition, it'll throw an error, because if this is undefined, it can't pull out name. So let's see what we got. Okay. Now it didn't render, and the reason why is because we are just using this as the destination when we want to be using it as the source. So we need to add 4 more parameters, which will then turn this from the destination to the source. So the destination, the values we're putting in will be the destination, and we want to put it in the A, kind of where the A button is. So we can do 153 or 150. You know what? No, 152.5. Then let's do 122, and we'll do it 30 by 30, just to start off with that. Let's go to index.js, and I'm going to load link up in the shop instead. So let's go to load screen, shop. Okay, it's rendering. Very good. But that doesn't look very good now, does it? So let's go back. So let's move it a bit over to the right and down, and we'll change the height of the sword just by a bit. 156, 124. Let's make it like 15. No, you know what? That's too small. Let's make it, yeah, I think my initial idea of 18 was good. Let's see. Oh, look at that. That looks pretty good. Now, if you guys notice, the way this is rendering, it's a bit unclear. With JavaScript and Canvas, the rendering isn't always perfect, so play around with the settings. There are a few other settings you can mess around with in the context that will allow you to render images a bit more clearly. See if you can get it to render better. Now let's go back. The last thing I want to do for the inventory at the moment is we want to handle when the user unpauses the game. So let's come down here, and it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to just make another if statement, And for sake of simplicity, I will just copy this. So if top is greater than negative 558, then we will subtract 10 from top. We'll do a very similar operation. And let's see how that works. That looks pretty good. Returns to where it needs to be. Cool. And we can refactor this as well, of course. Can just put this up here. We can get rid of this. Because all we really want is we just want the top value to be changed based on what the state is. Cool. Let's just make sure our refactor worked. Yep, and that looks good. That looks pretty good.